All right, and since I made the mistake of picking the wrong one, I'm going to give a grace period of 2 minutes for anybody else who may have done the same thing to show up, and then we'll get started. And do remember to keep your mics muted and your cameras off until we get to the end of the class, and then you can turn them both on and do whatever you need to do with them. And this class will be recorded, and I'll show you where to get the slides for that, as well as the slide deck that we're going to look at after the class. And since this class is on category management, there are some folks from the National Office of Category Management, the Category Management Support Office on the call, including Ashley Hammond just posted her name, her contact information on there, and y'all are going to get a slightly improved version of the slide deck because there is a recent change to one chart we're going to see that Ashley was like, Steve, you need to fix this. I was like, oh crap. Thanks, Ashley. So they're a great resource for you to use. And so we are 2 minutes past the hour, so we will get started. And I want to welcome you to another session of the AUS training series. And do please keep your mics closed till the end of the class and your cameras off. The VA network's not that great. But in this area AUS training series, all topics that we cover tie back to the key tasks identified in the AUS position description, or PD. And since the PD says what we have to know how to do, this class series focuses on the skills and topics that speak directly to what the PD says. And if we could get the fundamentals covered, we'll do great things and add that extra value that the AUS is intended to add to every activity of our organization, most often with our contracting efforts and utilization. But the more we know, the more we can help our customers do, and the smarter we can all do it. In this class, we will look at a topic fundamental to both the acquisition and utilization parts of our job title, and that is category management. I'm Stephen Clements, and I'll be your guide through this topic. I spent several years in VA contracting, switched sides to the good life of being an AUS, and earned the highest certification in contracting, the FACC Level 3. My lovely assistant and fellow ISNIC AUS, Martin Wallace, who's also FACC Level 1 certified, will be monitoring the chat and helping out because I might ask you some questions along the way, and he'll be happy to help you with your general questions. If you have a question specifically for me or for the audience, something you want to talk about, please bring it up when we're done with the class, and then we will stick around for as long as you want to talk about all of that. I mean, we've had people stick around for an hour and a half past the class ending just to keep talking on topics that's important to our job series. And so let me kick things off by asking you the question: what is category management? And Ashley, you can't answer this one. I know you already know the answer, uh, or CM as it's abbreviated. Please drop your answers in the chat. It's 2 words, one concept. What is it? What are these categories and why do they need managing? Or are you already category management experts? You've already got the certification in category management or the credential, and this is just a review for you. Is this news?
I'm waiting.
I got you. I got you.
don't know.
Mm,
Either they're either
okay.
they're all looking it up on Google or my internet is like super slow. Oh, wait a minute, I got a
No
question. I
Googling.
got some question marks. Let's see.
Question marks is
Lawrence
fine.
Carter came in as commodity services, staffing, construction. William Lawco says how things are grouped.
Hmm, hmm.
I think I recognize a couple of these names from yesterday. So these guys are providing their experience from yesterday's training. And that's about all I
Okay.
got, Stephen. So feel
All
free to
right.
move
Well,
forward.
it's a chill Thursday, and I understand across the country it's pretty chilly. So, but let's warm those brains up. The intended audience for this class is the AUS, although all are welcome. Our contracting people, our inventory people, our end users, dental technicians, whatever. Yeah, anybody that has anything to do with a contract or buying stuff with VA, you're welcome to come in here because there's going to be something that you're going to find valuable. And our task and our purpose include to familiarize the AUS with category management concepts. Our purpose in doing so is to provide context for the essential functions of the AUS job series and show how much our work can make an impact. Though not only AUSs can make that impact, we all have our parts to play. And our desired outcome is that attendees will learn what CM is, why it's at the core of what the AUS does, and how to do it. So we'll meet that task and purpose by looking at topics such as what is CM? What is its purpose? What's its goal? What does the AUS have to do with it? Who all's involved? And how do we action the principles we're going to discuss? We'll wrap up by summarizing what we talked about, and I'm going to point you to opportunities for further study. So, what is category management? I used to believe that it was a big fancy term used only by SESers and GS15s trying to make themselves look smart. Um, but after looking into it, it's not just hot air. There's a lot to it. Category management is a best business practice that's been employed by Fortune 500 companies for decades. And the federal government got involved as early as 2013 in investigating what we could benefit from using it. And in 2016, formally adopted category management as a best business practice. And the Office of Management and Budget, or OMB, as some of you might know it, published guidance in 2019 to direct all federal agencies to do it. It's from it's from that OMB memo we get our definition, which is the term category management refers to the business practice of buying common goods and services as an enterprise to eliminate redundancies, increase efficiency, and deliver more value and savings from the government's acquisitions programs. And OMB's Directive M1913 asks all federal agencies to take these 5 actions to establish category management plans, develop vendor management strategies, implement demand management, share data across agencies, and train and develop the workforce. And that last one, we're doing that right now. And to put it in my own terms, category management is simply making better, smarter contracts and purchasing decisions. At its root, it's a systematic analysis of what we need, how we buy things, and how we use them so we can figure out ways to do all 3 better. And the principles of CM focus on more effectively managing your contract spending, reducing your number of contracts and redundant costs, finding ways to use these ideas to better meet our small business contracting goals, all of which are intended to save us time, effort, and money spent on repetitive tasks for other things so we can better care for our veterans. So, what are these categories we want to manage? Well, OMB says we should analyze our spending on everything by grouping our purchases into 10 general categories, which are listed in the left column. And on this list, you're going to see things we buy regularly. For example, medical is a category that includes medical supplies and services. Facilities and construction is a category which covers facility maintenance services, lawn care, fire alarm inspections, and so on and so on. On the right, we have the federal agencies appointed to be the government wide leader for developing ideas on how to better manage spending in each category. But every agency needs to do the best they can in every category. And within category management, there's two main subfields of study. There's demand management, or DM, and vendor management, or VM. Demand management is planning and managing your demand for products and services. And it aims at improving the effectiveness of our buys and standardizing what we buy. Because the better you control your own demand, the more power you have over your contracts, your budget, and your mission outcomes. Demand management is you calling the shots instead of the shots calling you. And vendor management, it's the development and management of how we deal with our vendors through contracts and building relationships. And this is more than just picking vendors out of a solicitation for a new contract and filling out CPARs. This is also for vendor engagement strategies. And in future slides, we're going to speak more about both of these. And two more important concepts in CM are on this slide. In analyzing spending, CM lumps all spending into two categories: unmanaged spend and spend under management. As the names imply, one method is better than the other. And for perspective, is it better for your personal budget to be managed by impulse spending and not ever thinking ahead? Or is it better to plan where your dollars go after examining the facts and thinking your real needs through? Unmanaged spend is the bane of our existence, both personally and for VA. And I compared unmanaged spend to impulse buying because both involve spending money without looking at the big picture and thinking through the all things considered cost of immediate need. Using government purchase cards to place orders at the last minute instead of making longer term contracts to manage known repetitive needs is a prime culprit, but people keep doing it. The average VISN has 8 major facilities in it and a whole bunch of CBOCs, and most of them have the same needs. If every major facility makes their own contract for those common needs, that's considered unmanaged spending. If instead of 8 separate contracts, a VISN were to make one contract to cover them all, that VISN and the facilities in them could get consistent terms, conditions, and leverage the bigger buying power of speaking for 8 facilities instead of one to secure better pricing. And that leads us into talking about spend under management, which uses that strategic thinking to meet our needs while using less time, less effort, and results to get us better deals. If you know that your GI clinic might need biopsy equipment and supplies, which is a smarter way of meeting those needs? Is it waiting until the last minute multiple times a year to whip out the credit card, place an order, and hope it gets in time? Or making an estimate of how many items you need through the year, make a single order that'll keep you supplied throughout the year, and you've already got your delivery scheduled? Well, the obvious answer is number two. Benefit of that second option is that in planning out one buy instead of not planning out several buys, is that in the process you'll develop a better understanding of your department's needs, and so you won't be surprised as often. And when you're asked what your people need to do their jobs, you'll have answers that you didn't make up on the spot. I'm not saying anybody on this call does that. I'm just saying some people have done that. And to go back to our visit example, if instead of 8 facility contracts we made one visit contract, that means 7 fewer contract packages have to be made to meet the same need. And it's estimated that in making a new contract, that could take ballpark of 173 labor hours, and every one of those hours costs money. By some math that myself and Vision 20 AUS Phil Cyphers did, just on the government side, this isn't counting how much it costs the vendors to respond to our solicitations and in making contracts. Just on the government side, to create a new contract, you're looking at about $5,500 each. And that's probably a conservative number, even just for our side. Instead of 8 contracting officers having to work 8 requirements packages, you'd only have to have one of each if you're making that consolidated contract. This also means instead of 8 cores and hospital departments having to make their own requirements packages, that work could be spread around over many shoulders to help carry that burden, which makes it lighter. And every hour we do not spend making redundant contracts is an hour we can spend on caring for veterans or supporting those who do. Now, what about if instead of one contract per VISN, we made one per consortium, which has usually got 4 to 5 VISNs in it, and covered all those with one contract instrument? That means instead of making 40 contracts um, per facility, and then the number of contracts per VISN, we'd be making one to cover all of them. And at that level, we leverage our buying power even better and help provide for our common needs with even less effort. And if you're not sure what a consortium is, I guarantee you're in one right now. And I'd encourage you to learn more about yours and how you can maybe help with this effort. And so instead of 40 facilities needing to take 6 months to a year to meet their needs on one contract, a handful of people take a little longer to meet everyone's needs. And then repeat that thought process across an entire agency, then multiple agencies, and then nationwide for the entire federal government. There are economies of scale we can get just from doing that. On the right side of the slide, you're going to see the grading scale OMB uses to score our spending, and it mirrors what I just described with best in class, most high value contracts that cover the most, do the most, or that are the best deals, being the top, and unmanaged spend being the worst. The bigger and better the contract, the higher a grade OMB gives it. The higher the grade, the more you should use that contract if you have that need. And there are lists of these contracts you can look at, and I'll point them out to you later on. Uh, when in your market research, you see that what you need is already covered by an existing contract instrument, you should use that contract instead of making a new one. And if, say, there's like a little term or condition that is on the existing one that doesn't quite meet what you need, see if you can get it modified. You'd save you a lot of time instead of having to make a new one. And when planning for your next contract to replace the one you have for your current requirement, think of how your current contract stacks up in this context. Does it look more like completely unmanaged spending, or are you doing what you can within your sphere of influence to make it a better, smarter contract? And you don't have to solve the problem for the nation on every contract that you do. We're not asking that, but you can improve what you can reach, and make the best of what you got. And using these analysis tools to look at our spending is important because the federal government is the single largest buyer of goods and services in the world. VA is the second largest federal agency, and in FY 2023, our budget request, last I checked, is over $301 billion. That's a lot of money. And we have a responsibility to make sure we're good stewards of that money. And that's a VA mission, and it's part of our individual missions as VA employees. Whether it's explicitly written in your job description or not, finding ways to maximize every dollar spent for the good of the veteran is your job. And if VA didn't care about spending money responsibly, why would we have to take classes on fraud, waste, and abuse every year? They at least care enough to make us do that. And to give an example of how valuable CM can be, through the end of FY 2020, the federal government achieved 45 billion in savings over 5 years by applying the principles we're talking about. So that's an average of 5 billion a year. And where I come from, 5 billion a year, that's real money. I mean, some of y'all that might not impress you, but I think it's impressive. And the savings came from applying the principles we're talking about to buys for the commonly needed goods and services that account for 60% of our spend. The government eliminated an estimated 50,000 duplicate contracts, which reduced administrative costs and better used our employees' time and effort. And using our estimated costs from earlier, the one to make a contract, that would represent about $274 million saved in labor costs, coming in at about 8.6 million labor hours. That's a lot. By the end of FY 2025, the goal is to have 75% of our common spending managed through bigger, better contract solutions. And as we touched on, two opportunities we have are to leverage our buying power and reduce the number of duplicate contracts. In FY 20, 30% of our obligated spend consumed 81% of contracts written. So there's going to be some redundant contracts in there. We have a lot of room for improvement. And the good news is that we can improve what we do. It's very doable. Speaking to vendor management, the more redundant contracts we make, the more redundant costs we impose on our vendors. The more fragmented our buying, the more time vendors must spend responding to our requests. And us better managing our demand allows for the vendors who work with us to realize decreased costs making bids, proposals, quotes, and in their own contract admin work. And drawing your attention to the points on the slide, when we spend money as effectively as trying to herd cats, we act like a bunch of small companies that don't work as a team and who do not know what each other are doing. We lose a lot of opportunities that way. And as we mentioned, when the government started applying CM principles, we found 45 billion in savings. We touched on getting worse pricing by not better managing our spend because we do get large price variances in our buys. The examples on the right, these are taken from our own contracting solutions across VA. And notice the difference on those CPAP mask scalpels and the blood pressure cuffs. Somebody at a VA was paying $130 for a CPAP mask instead of the $61 another VA was spending for the exact same product. And as a Wisnik AUS, I've seen this firsthand in the contract prices we're paying across my 5 VISNs. And I also data mine contracts from the rest of the country to see what they're getting and across the country. Some of us are getting ripped off and some of us are getting great deals. And that's why I try to make contracts that secure the best pricing for all 40 plus of my facilities. And even if in your day to day job, you don't work with that many facilities, say you just have one, when someone like me comes around and asks for your help to do a contract like this, you can definitely help us get better pricing for yourselves and others by providing the information we need and applying these principles to the work you do. And the measures of success that we should see from better pursuing CM are all these that we got listed on the slide. By working together to make better buys, we help each other better define our requirements and write better contracts. By knowing our true levels of need, we can better plan for how to meet them and save money. By sharing our best practices with each other, we can use each other's best ideas to improve our own work areas. I personally just ripped off a great idea from Walla Walla that had a QCR with their AUS team, and thank y'all, appreciate it. By making fewer and smarter buys, we can give our purchasing agents and contracting officers more time to focus on the rest of their duties, which are very important. Because if you've ever harassed a CO to deobligate 25 cents so you can close out this thing with fiscal, the reason they're not getting to that isn't because they don't want to. It's because somebody's got a new contract request shoved in their face and stomping their feet until they get it. So COs having more time to do that would be great. The closer we get to making and using best in class contracts, the better the pricing we can receive. And by better managing our spending, we'll be better stewards of the dollars we were given to care for our veterans. And every slide we've talked about leads up to this one right here, our ultimate purpose, and talking about category management. And VA's lead person for category management loves this slide because it hits our purpose in the bullseye. If we can save money in one area, we may be able to spend it in another. So if we save money on supply buys, we might be able to hire more staff. And think about the lives that we can save by additional opportunities to speak with a mental health counselor. Think about the benefits to our veterans if they have more nurses to care for them. And think about the reduced time waiting for an appointment if we could afford to hire more doctors. And since our job is the veteran, whether we're in the background or giving direct patient care, they served our country and we're here to serve them to the best of our ability. And so now that I've spent a lot of time talking about category management, what is the AUS's role regarding that? Please drop your answers in the chat. What do we specifically have to do with it? Is this just something that big brains at central office sit around with, thinking of ways to transform how we do things, and we're just supposed to wait until they come and tell us what to do, and then we hop to and do it? What do y'all think? What does the AUS have to do with this?
Marie's so sweet. She said because Stephen and Martin told us we have to do it.
Yeah, darn right. So listen. That's
uh,
right.
Timothy Wooster said educate self and customers. Christopher Langley says guide customers to better contracts that are more like spend, like SAC contracts, utilization of MSPV, etc., to drive better pricing.
Yeah, these are some good answers we got. And since CM speaks to understanding how we do things, how we buy and use the supply, services, and other things that we need, and finding ways to do all that smarter, it behooves us to take a look at our PD to see what it has to say about it. Maybe it tells us where we fit in. And our PD does have a lot to say about that, even if it doesn't specifically mention category management. And you'll see that in the key lines I've got up here. The AUS is supposed to be an expert on pre award contract activities, which is where planning the requirement takes place. This is where you do your demand management. We're charged to study how our contracts are used so we can use those insights to better how we help our customers acquire the things they need to acquire and how to do that smarter. And we're supposed to lead the research and analysis of how we use and acquire the things we need. And we are supposed to look at that bigger picture. After all, an AUS isn't just a clerk in a logistics department. Our PD requires us to serve the entire facility we're assigned to. We are to help serve the facility, the VISN, the consortium, and the nation as best we can. We can be a force for standardization in terms of the things we buy, how they're used, and how we do things. And of any job series in VA, the AUS is designed to be a prime player in category management. We have acquisition and utilization in our name, which perfectly matches up to what CM wants us to look at. So that's why the AUS is interested in CM, but who else is involved? Well, there's four major players, and some of these might be categories of players. Up at the top, you got the senior accountable officer, and that's going to be the deputy secretary for each agency, and they're charged with creating strategic vision for what CM success is going to look like for them. They're supposed to establish agency goals to support that mission, and they also designate the chief acquisition officer, who is going to oversee the implementation of category management within the agency. SAO also designates category managers to be responsible for the categories we discussed. They each get assigned one, hopefully not more than one, but they're going to break that up. And these managers are supposed to develop success metrics. How do we measure our advance towards these goals, and are responsible for establishing um, category goals that support the overall agency goals. They're supposed to do the research, both government and into both government industry CM practices, ideas on how to best implement those practices, to identify training opportunities, available contract resources, and analyze the overall spending in their categories to see how things are going. And the acquisition workforce. This is at the bottom of the list, but this isn't ranked in order of importance. Uh, we just happen to be closest to the worker bees here. And this consists not only of acquisition professionals like COs and AUSs, but this is also your program managers and end users who actually have the requirements we make contracts for. We are the ones who will drive improvement because we are the ones who directly impact the measures of success that everybody else is looking at. Those senior leaders we just talked about, they can make whatever plans they want, but if we're not doing it, then nothing happens. No dollars are going to get saved, and our dollars are not going to be better spent. It's on us to develop better requirement statements, standardized product requirements, or encourage people to do that, plan our demand, and ensure the best contract vehicles are being used. I say again, without each of us applying these principles to make smarter decisions, nothing anybody above the acquisition workforce wants is going to amount to a hill of beans. So we are critical to this. And since we are the linchpins of success here, how do we do it? Well, you just do these three things on the screen. You implement a robust demand management Analytical process that identifies what your facility needs to purchase, how often, and the total cost of ownership. Develop vendor management strategies to strengthen partnerships with our vendors and use the power of combining like item buys to gain economies of scale through strategic sourcing. Sounds simple, so class is over, you go do it. I'm just kidding. We're going to talk more about each one of these things. And in identifying how we can implement these principles, it helps to put our discussion in context of, where are we doing these things? That context is the acquisition process. And we see a flow chart of that here. Both the program office or end users involved as are the AUSs in contracting. You see two big boxes for demand and vendor management, and they align with certain parts of the process, and there's some overlap. Demand management usually comes early, and we'll look at that one first. Identifying your needs, defining your requirements directly impact everything that comes later. And when we define requirements, how are we doing it? How are our customers doing it? Are we giving well written descriptions of the requirements to our COs when we send in our packages? Or are we sending in a scanned copy of a brochure a vendor gave us and saying, give me that? For anything other than purchase card orders, that second one is not enough. Are there ways we can improve our documentation and our own understanding of the need? Part of understanding the need is to analyze the total cost of ownership of what we want. And contracting is going to ask us to show our level of need. So, do we know what the level of need is? And how detailed is that knowledge? Do we know how many supplies we use and how many hours we need vendor technicians for? We have that information somewhere, and if we don't have it systematized yet, we can build ways to track these things. And we can check current inventories and our rates of use. Those are things we need to know anyway, and contracting is going to demand it of us. So our lives will be much happier if we give that information to contracting up front when we send in the requirements package. Because I've noticed a major source of delays is when contracting asks for a critical piece of information from the customer, information they can't get on their own, and then the customer runs and hides. And that puts contracting in a terrible position because they have to decide what to do. Do they reject the contract request because they don't have the information they need to proceed? Or maybe worse, do they make it up themselves, which is not only inappropriate, but it will make for a worse contract? Um, it's the contract requester's job to provide this information. So let's make sure that none of our people are fighting it. Um, and a key part of the AUS job is making sure our requirements packages say what they need to say. So, make sure you're going over every requirements package and the documents in them with your customers before they get sent over to contracting. And I know some customers will fight you on that, but keep up the pressure to get those eyes on it. That you're part of the process improvement, and let's get that value in there. So for demand management, I mentioned it's planning methodology used to forecast, plan for, and manage our demand for products and services, which can help control spending and pricing. It assists in standardizing what we use, which also impacts our vendor management and strategic sourcing efforts because all these things are interconnected. All these concepts we're working with. And improving the effectiveness of future planning processes across VA is one of our goals in demand management. Demand forecasting. That's planning to make purchases at the best time of the year to get better pricing. It's useful to understand that some item prices may change based on seasons, times of year, other financial considerations, the fiscal year, and that structure can make a difference. All this can impact our budget planning process, and doing a better job forecasting demand can help. Supply planning is another important component because logisticians they work with program offices and end users to move products through our facilities, and this planning involves understanding our rates of use, storage costs, inventory availability, spoilage rates, and other factors that not everybody thinks about all the time. And by helping our customers know their needs and their inventories, we can learn which items are repetitive needs and may be creating duplicate orders, which eat up additional time and resources. And we're going to make sure our clinicians get the tools they need, but there are many opportunities for our customers to standardize what they use and so avoid redundancy costs. And this feeds into operation planning, or how we execute our missions and how our efforts are used to meet requirements. Without understanding how the products we buy are used and at what rate, we cannot effectively forecast or improve our cost avoidance measures. And there's many ways we can analyze and research demand levels and related data. Um, and the data needed to support making smarter decisions comes from analysis of internal and external data sources. On the slide, there's a bunch of types of analysis you can use. And while we won't go over every example on the screen, I do want to touch on some of these to help give you some ideas. And one we'll look at is spend analysis. It's where you analyze your spending based on a category or group of products or just a specific product. Um, and for big VA purposes, they look at the whole category and it's got everything that falls in that category underneath it. For example, spend analysis of the medical category. That's what found the CPAP example we talked about. For us, most of us, since we're not working at the big VA level every day, we can do spend analysis on the things we do work with every day. We can also do contract analysis, where we find copies of contracts, identify metrics such as prices paid, number of suppliers active, and seeing if there's price variances between the examples we look at and trying to understand why. We also need to understand how external forces such as social, environmental, technological, and political changes impact us, because better believe that political thing has impacted us several times just in the time I've been here. Like the Choice Act moved to the Mission Act. That was political. The Kingdom Ware Court decision, that was political. And market analysis helps inform us of factors affecting pricing, where the best deals are, who the players are, and what we can do to reduce our supply chain risks. We had briefly mentioned total cost of ownership, and here's more details to go into that. So, this is a financial analysis to determine all the costs involved in the purchase, operation, and maintenance of an item over its lifetime. Because by some estimates, as much as 75% of the total cost of a product can come after it's been bought, and that's called your operating cost. And to give an example, think of a car. It costs X amount of dollars to buy the car, but then there's all kinds of expenses that go with operating, maintaining it. You got your oil changes, you got your gas, you got your replacement parts, you got the labor that goes with it, you got your licensing fees. Heaven help you, do you have speeding tickets, so on and so on. Um, and if this sounds like a new concept, you look at how much it costs to procure an item, the needed training to use it, the warranties you may need, how much it costs to maintain, the technicians needed to use it, the cost of inventorying it, the cost of storing it, the cost to dispose of it, and so on and so on. And this concept, total cost of ownership, impacts the other parts of CM, such as cost avoidance and standardizing what we use. For example, if we need to train our people to use different brands of equipment that all do the same thing, that training has a number of costs. It costs money to do it, costs time to do it, and each of them are going to have their own parts and expendable supplies, all of which have to be paid for, stored somewhere, and moved from storage to the clinic by somebody. It could also introduce negative health outcomes because, say, you've got three types of direct patient care equipment, and a technician has more experience with two of them than they do the third one, and they make a mistake while using the third one. Well, that's not good. Um, and so, having these additional items that they needed to learn, there's a direct cost of that. That's something to consider. Just to sum it up, something that looks cheap up front might actually wind up costing you more over the long term. So this is an important concept. And to put the principles of in terms of concrete things we can do, we got some examples up here on how to do demand management. We'll touch on some of them. Some of these we do, some of our customers do, and as our facilities advisors, we have a legitimate place in guiding our customers and ourselves to do better in each of these areas. Like, don't be extra. If you have something that still works to do the job it needs to do, just keep it. As long as you're not at some risk of catastrophic failure in it, if it's working fine and it's still got expected lifespan in it, keep running with it. Don't end a fiscal year rush. It might not come as a surprise to some of you, but it might surprise some of you that when all the departments are trying to burn through whatever money they have left at the end of the fiscal year, that's not a secret. And vendors know that they're in a panic to spend all that money rather than turn it back in, which I don't know, sounds kind of wasteful from that fraud, waste, and abuse triangle. So I wouldn't be surprised if some vendors are raising prices at that time of year. Reducing product variability. We talked about that with the example of the medical devices. And, like, on the slide, you've got what, six different colors of medical tape. Do you need six, or could you just go with one? That could help out with your inventory management. And there's different ways of doing that. Making sure to rotate your stock reduces expired goods. That's nice. Reducing your number of contracts. We touched on that. The government as a whole saved a whole bunch of money by eliminating those 50,000 redundant contracts. We could do the same thing. And hoarding. Now, if you've been in environmental management services, or people who are, there might be some of your folks who have their little squirrel holes where they put their microfiber towels or their mop heads. And that used to drive my EMS supervisor nuts when I was helping him with his contract, because he kept having all these lost item charges from the vendor that was doing our laundry service for us. And he tried, putting the onus on the vendor, like, you're losing my stuff. And the vendor asked him, what do you think I'm doing? Am I eating it? And then the manager went looking around and he found his people were hiding stuff all over the place. That's one way you can save money right there. And so, since we talked about demand management, we're going to go on to vendor management. And those considerations are in purple on the slide. Does the vendor provide the best value, pricing, and customer service? Is the vendor on an established contract vehicle that we could use? And does the vendor provide strategic value to the organization? And this one, VM, it plays a role in many steps of the acquisition life cycle, as you can see: market research, vetting responsible vendors, writing market research reports. And it also runs from the solicitation all the way through to contract award, but it doesn't end there. Anytime we interact with a vendor or potential vendor, we're engaged in vendor management, because the ways we treat them impacts the way they treat us. And, there's always opportunities for improvement on both sides. So, if vendor management is the development, management, and control of vendor contracts, relationships, and performance, its aim is to develop partnerships between our vendors and us. And we can do a part of that when we work with the solicitation and award process, when we provide contract oversight to make sure things are going well, and at all kinds of other times. For example, we could ask our COs to write incentives into our contracts for the winning vendor to find us cost reduction opportunities, because the more ways they find for us to save money while, meeting the need and being safe, the more bonuses we could give them. That's the thing the FAR allows. And so there's a carrot, but we also have a stick, because we can write penalties into our QUASPs for subpar performance. Once as a CO, I wrote in a QUASP that if my snow removal contractor is late in showing up to clear a CBOC parking lot in New Hampshire, because believe me, they need snow removal, I would dock their next invoice by 10%. And one day my core called me up, said the vendor is late. So after I verified all the details, I knocked 10% off their next payment. They got the message and never showed up late again. And the vendor's free to provide us feedback on all this stuff. And we can judge their commitment to customer service by watching how they respond to our concerns, because that's the main focus of the QUASP, is us telling the vendor, this is what we care the most about. This is how we're going to measure what you do. And this is how we're going to. Fantastic. All right. Can y'all hear me? My network dropped for a second.
Yes, we can.
All right, very good. Thank you all for not ditching on out. School is not out yet.
Your
Okay.
screen's not sharing though.
Yes, I've got to do that. I had to get back in. Here we go. And thank you. Appreciate you. I was talking about that VA network not being great. Well, here's my proof for it. All right, so the QUASPs. How did the vendor react to a situation where things didn't go to plan? Did they respond effectively and quickly, or did they string us along and ignore us and not fix the problem? This is important stuff for us to know. Um, and we can invite the vendors to help us ad- identify how we want our requirements met, or what the best require or what the best product to meet a requirement is. We can do all that through uh, two contracting tools called your CO can post a source of sought. They can do requests for information where we invite vendors to give us feedback on all of that stuff, as well as identifying who's interested in our business. Um, and there's right and wrong ways to do this to interact with our vendors and gather this information. There's classes that touch on it way more than we have time for, um, but it's a whole field of study. And when I was a CEO, I had vendors I could count on to give me great advice while maintaining all proprieties, and their feedback directly improved my contracts and my pricing. They knew that I was going to treat them with respect, give them straight answers, and treat them fairly. So even if they didn't get the contract, they knew that Steve gave them a fair shake. Then there were some vendors that couldn't get right, couldn't do the job, were combative, generally unpleasant, and so on. Um, these are things to know and see what we can fix, what we can't, what we can improve, and what we can't. And one thing that we can do is host industry days. That was listed on the previous slide. Have any of you ever done one? Or like a small business event, maybe? Have you been to one? Drop your answers in the chat. Yesterday, we did have a couple people that had done that before.
Marie has for surgical beds.
That's good. That's good.
Walla Walla has.
That's good. And did you find those to be helpful to what you were doing? Okay. So we got some yeses, we got some nos.
Yep.
Um, and you could, we've got a number of tools available to us today because having like a a conference call like this, it's easier and cheaper now to do at any time before. You could also just email a bunch of vendors. This is pre-solicitation, pre you getting, making it officially contracting's gig, and asking them general questions about what they do, who they are, what kind of business they do they have feedback on this or that. Don't give them anything too specific, but you can get all kinds of information in a variety of ways, and it can really help things out. And here's a list of strategies we can use to advance our VM goals. We should look at who we're spending dollars with and how much we're spending with them, because we might have room to demand better pricing. And if we have a bigger requirement to meet, then we might be able to squeeze some more discounts out of them. And we have to engage in contract oversight so we can learn what works and what doesn't. And to add lessons learned to our own knowledge and be able to share that with others. Our market research and discussion with vendors, we can see who's truly capable of meeting our needs and who isn't. And another thing to remind you of is just because we have small business goals, particularly for SDVOSBs and VOSBs, doesn't mean we can accept bad deals from them, because it doesn't matter who it is that's offering us a bad deal, we are not supposed to take it. And we can do a better job reaching out to our vendors before a solicitation, having our COs do it during a solicitation, and then keeping up the communication channels after award. We can definitely do all these things to help increase our understanding, as well as the vendors' understanding of what we need. So even if they didn't get a contract the first time around, next time when they've got a clearer picture, maybe we've written a more detailed PWS and better defined our needs to where more people can understand it, we could get more competition and possibly get a better deal. because we definitely want a competitive marketplace not owned by a small number of vendors, because monopolies breed bad pricing and service because they know you don't have another choice. And with demand management, we looked at several solid examples of things we could do better. And I also find big failures can teach us important lessons. So for VM, let's look at this one. That's about as bad as I think it can go. And while I was initially writing this class, a VAO newsletter dated September 8th, 2022, came up with a curious case of Fat Leonard. And as I read this to you, please drop in the chat what you think might have gone wrong in this situation. And let's see what we got going on here. So, a Malaysian businessman at the center of the worst modern bribery scandal in the U.S. has escaped house arrest and is on the run just 3 weeks before his sentencing date. Skipping down. After being arrested in a sting operation in 2013, the former defense contractor pled guilty to bribing senior Navy officers, people who should know better, with parties, fancy dinners, luxury items, and even tickets to a Lady Gaga concert. I guess they were some senior officer monsters in that group. In exchange for information to secure more military contracts, an effort that swindled the service out of tens of millions of dollars. Uh, Fat Leonard, that's his nickname. I didn't give it to him. Leonard Glenn Francis, he had a business and he had been under house arrest in San Diego until one day authorities found an empty house, a pair of scissors, and the ankle monitor they had put on him. When they asked the neighbors, they said, "Oh yeah, we saw some U-Hauls out here. I guess that's where I guess he left." And while he's was eventually captured in Venezuela while trying to flee justice, and he's fighting extradition to the U.S. Last I checked, this is this is not a good way to do vendor management. So if you ever have concerns about am I doing it right, just look at this slide and then think, am I in another Fat Leonard situation? Because you don't want to be there. And so a concept that plays to both of these fields that we talked about is strategic sourcing, which is the establishment or modification of contracts to better address our buying needs so we can more effectively leverage our dollars, market position, and so on. And we have an abundance of strategic sourcing vehicles already on the books and ready to use. Um, You'll see on the slide there's some purple text with underline. Those have been hyperlinked. If you haven't been to these links, I suggest you go check them out. And if you have been, I suggest you go check them out anyway, because it might be updated since last time you looked. It'll take you right to them. You can take a look at some contract vehicles that might allow you to meet your needs faster and easier, so you can focus on things that other things that need your attention. And just to pull two examples, two sample contracts out of those strategic source instruments we talked about, here's a couple to give you an idea what you might find. So the vector contracts, these are a series of IDIQs with SDVOSBs that the VA SAC made. And this this is for requirements where you have temporary non-clinical staffing services that you need to fill for a prolonged period of time. And these IDIQs have printed price lists. So even if you don't wind up using it, you can use that to help further your market research. Contrast that to the OASIS contracts, which is a best in class series of IDIQs from GSA. So it's got, that highest score you can get. And this focuses on individual projects regarding engineering and R&D services. And there's no price lists because these are designed to let you use competition to establish what fair and reasonable would look like. And here's some strategies, regardless of which contracts instrument you use to buy, that you can use to help get the best deal, such as, do you have the right contractor for the job? The first bullet speaks to that. Are you buying the same item from a bunch of different vendors who each give you different prices and customer service? It might be a better idea to compete for only one supplier to give you the best deal over the long term. And if you have equipment that uses consumable supplies, who are you buying those from, the manufacturer or somebody else? There could be significant price differences. And there could be a question of legality because VA is prohibited from buying gray market goods. And speaking of prices, make sure to have a look around to see what those different price points are and make sure you're getting the best one. This is where your market research is really important, because it can help identify what all those other prices are, and your contract analysis can help pull that out. Recently, a CO of mine resolicited a requirement because we did a SDVSB set aside, and the price we got back was way too high. And we knew it was way too high because the SDVSB that responded, we had used two of their existing contracts as price references and saw that they, even after we asked them, is this your best and final price? It was still 30% higher than what they were charging other people. So that's a no brainer. And don't forget to ask, or have your CO ask, is this your best and final price? Because I've seen it knock half of the price off of what they had already quoted to you. So it can do wonders, and it's free to ask. Another strategy you can use is account for your storage space, your customers' daily demands, and optimizing your delivery schedule to make everything flow smoother. Maybe that's a value added thing that a vendor could do for you. And so if a vendor can meet those kind of criteria more optimally than a lower priced vendor could, you could go with that higher one because that could represent value to your acquisition, that their capability better matches what you really want. There's ways to do that. And there's many more strategies we could discuss, but I just wanted to give you this list to come look at and to touch on a few of those. And as we wrap up the class, I want to present a case study that we're all going to be familiar with that speaks to each of the principles we've covered. And the fact that it's such an extreme example is going to allow us to clearly analyze the situation to see what part of category management fits in where. So let's go back to 2020 and the declaration of COVID-19 as a national emergency. For demand management, orders came from the top that we needed face masks everywhere. Prior to COVID-19, VA demand for protective face masks was negligible compared to the demand we suddenly had to meet, because it wasn't just for a few customers that had used them in the past. Now everybody everywhere needed an unprecedented amount of masks. So, and there was a lot of confusion about what masks we even could use legally or could offer any protection. For example, if a mask and a vendor of that mask were not cleared by the FDA to sell in the US, we weren't supposed to buy them because we couldn't verify they met safety standards. Yet, how many people knew where to look to see which vendors and which masks the FDA cleared and which ones they didn't? Do you even know what the term cleared means? I mean, that's a point of confusion right there. And the largest independent U.S. producer of quality masks at the time refused to increase production to meet the demand. Why on earth would they do that? Who would leave that much money on the table, because fortunes were made in pandemic response? Well, when I looked into it, I found they were unwilling to expand too much too fast and be left holding the bag when demand collapsed. That's a reasonable fear. And if they had expanded as much as they would have needed to, that would probably require taking on a lot of debt, a lot of new employees, the risks that go with that, quality might drop, and all kinds of complications. So it's important we understand how our vendors see things. And since there was a run on legitimate mass suppliers, of course, opportunistic middlemen showed up with fly by night companies to defraud the federal government, including SDVOSBs and VOSBs, who had no business selling these masks and whose pricing started at least 3 times the pre COVID price. So that creates a hazard for how do you determine what fair and reasonable pricing is. And a lot of these people ran off with the money, failed to deliver, and a lot have been prosecuted for fraud. While OIGs clawed back a lot of those funds, some of them are gone forever. And the suppliers most capable of meeting the incredible level of demand were Chinese companies, many or all of whom are at least partially owned by the Chinese Communist government. That by itself could increase our level of risk because the FAR directly prohibits us from buying certain things from China, such as Huawei equipment, because there's a very justifiable concern the Chinese Communist government's going to use it to spy on us. And then back to the masks. Chinese safety and production standards are often very lacking, and they send us a lot of subpar and contaminated masks, but they still cash those checks we sent them. And for strategic sourcing, the federal government took over the main international manufacturer of protective masks, took them over. Their supply was put on allotment, so we only got what each central plant or what a central planner told us we would get, and if we needed more, that was on us. We had to go find it somehow, some way. And besides having to compete with the entire world for masks, the decentralized panic buying also hurt our chances of leveraging our buying power to get better pricing. And so these are these are some factors that, looking at the situation through the lens of category management, can help us tease out what lessons learned can we get from this. How can we position ourselves to do better in the future? And I'm sure there's a lot more details that y'all could pick up on. And if you want to drop those in the chat, I'd love to read them. And so we're going to summarize some key takeaways here: that knowing how to see the big picture and make better, smarter contracts is the AUS job, because understanding what we use and how we use it is our middle name. CM is a field of study dedicated to improving everything that we do, because leveraging every dollar to better serve our veterans is our goal. So for future study, VA's Category Management Support Office has made these 3 very informative TMS classes that expand on the topics we covered. So if you go in and you take these, you're going to see some familiar material because I strip mined them for material to make this presentation, but you're going to see more material and an expansion of this material in each of these. So these are very much worth your time. They're 1 hour apiece and self-paced. And so for my last question to you, my beloved and exceedingly good-looking audience, above average in every respect, you all are, did you find that this class helped you learn for the first time or refresh your knowledge of category management? So great. What did you find most helpful? If not, what did we miss? Such as Tic Tacs. I didn't mention Tic Tacs one time until just now.
But
Is that
Lawrence
a big
did
deal?
again.
And so just let us know what your thoughts were. Drop it in the chat. Send us an email. And so what's the look at? Did we help anybody, Martin?
Either their network is super slow today or no, because nobody's got any responses. But I'm sure they're coming in.
Oh no! Oh no!
Wait a minute. Let's see. Christopher Langley says, I'd like to think we finally got the contract through and we all have lovely, fresh and orange breath. Apparently he likes the orange ones.
Good, good, good.
Gary Pataka says, yes, thank you. Good information. Tim Wooster, very much.
Great,
Orange
great.
Carter says, more Tic Tacs. No, I'm just kidding. He said, I learned who is responsible for CM.
We all are.
That's
And
right.
so I appreciate those responses, Martin, and I thank you for your time, and we hope you got value out of this class. And so that's the end of what I have to say. So do you have any questions, comments, or other discussions you want to have? Because keep those in mind, because after I show you where the class slides can be found and where this recording is going to be found, I'll stick around for as long as we have things to talk about whatever you want to, whether it has anything to do with category management or not. And in case Ashley or the other category management support office people are still on, if y'all have got anything you'd like to spotlight, let's do it. So if you go to this SharePoint site right here, this is Operations Planning and Readiness SharePoint site, you're going to see a folder for every class that we've given. And if you click into them, you're going to see PowerPoint slide that we gave during that class, supplemental information that goes with it, as well as the recording. So if you ever want to watch that, these are often also, I think about 6 of these are available in TMS. So you can do that. And don't forget, for any one of these that you take, you can self-register in Cornerstone On Demand as an external learning event right on the front page or landing page after you log in. On the right, there's a tab, External Learning Event Request, for 1 CLP. And what I do, because I get a CLP for teaching the class, and so could you if you decide to do that, is I take the email invite from Outlook, print it as a PDF, and when it asks for proof that you were there, I put that in there, and I've never had a problem with it. I will drop that link in the chat in case y'all need it. And that's what I got. So anybody else, what do we got to talk about? I see Christopher Langley's got a hand up. If you wish to unmute yourself now, you can, or if you just want to drop your question in the chat, whatever is best for you. Now, don't be nervous. I just spent an hour talking. So, no need to, we're amongst friends here.
You make
Can you
them
hear me now?
nervous, Stephen. There we go.
All right. So some of us
Hey, there we are.
AUSs are not necessarily involved in that early planning. Are there other tools that
Mm,
we can use to work better with our peers across a VISN or a region? Um, Particularly in the VA, we use uh, uh, CPRC, which is for clinical products, and SEPG, which is for equipment. But
mm.
in my position, currently, we're not really involved with that. So knowing in advance and trying to get that consolidation ruling is very difficult.
I understand. And some customers, and it varies almost from facility to facility as to what role the AUS does play or is allowed to play. Because one of the shortcomings of creating the or in for the AUS job series as a whole is that it was identified that we need them back in 2016 or thereabouts, and then they were there were FTE slots made for them across the country. There is a beautiful position description written that details all the things that we're supposed to do, and in it says that the AUS is supposed to review all contract packages or requirements packages for their facility, every one of them. It's written in our PD, but there are some customers that it's usually FMS says, no, get out of my business. And there's some customers that love us and um, work with us all the time. And then there's some supervisors that don't really know what we're supposed to be doing because they're not contracting experts, and maybe they don't understand the PD as the plain language says it does. And then they have us be, quote, super cores, which is bull crap, and make us into step and fetchits. So the implementation of the AOS job series, we're working on that. And like this class is part of that because we're educating folks on this is what your PD says, and then this is what you're supposed to do with what the PD says. And now the answer is going to be long, but I'm going to get to more specifics for you. And one thing that one project I've got is to make one of these classes to aim at our supervisors to educate them on this is what your PD says your people are supposed to be doing. Here's the value it's going to add, and here's what you need to do to help them give you that value, both training and task organization. Um, and so, just to get just a little more detail, um, are none of your departments have you involved in their contract package formation and submission? I wouldn't be
So,
surprised if it is the case.
so we are right now we are tasked on the very back end. 2237 is already made, a vendor is already selected, put the documents
Wow.
into force and make sure the customer has all the right documents done, which that is fair. That is part of the whole scope of the exercise. But I'm getting a lot of things that are like, no, this could have been procured MedSurg Prime Vendor.
Oh
Hey,
my
this is an
God.
alternate that could have been procured through SAC, and we're already at the tail end when contracting is expecting on their doorstep. So it's very curious. I've never been so uninvolved in the early process till I got here. It's not a bad thing, but I can see the failure.
Oh, yes, it is a bad thing because you just outlined a lot of very significant failures. Because, like, what's contracting been working with if the force package hasn't even gone in yet? That's
Nothing.
horrifying.
Well,
Um,
that's the thing is they're not working on anything. They're they're literally been like, okay, well, we're not involved until we get a full force package. Okay,
but the vendor was already selected from this model. That's bad. So
there's a lot of
go ahead.
problems.
Yeah, it sounds like I would recommend two approaches. Maybe you've done them already. Um, and maybe you haven't, but one is you directly market yourself to the departments and be a bit of a pest if you need to let them know, hey, if you ever have a problem with contracting, that's my job is to help you with that. Matter of fact, what are you working on right now? What contracts do you have right now? And you know, push yourself onto them in that regard because we get paid to do this. And yeah, that's right, Lawrence. No pain, no gain. And the second one, in addition to directly engaging those end users and program offices, is to see if you can get your facilities process changed by persuading the higher ups. And I mean not just your supervisor, but the facility director, your VISN, your VISN, say CLO, your chief logistics officer. Uh, Make the case to them. Has this been tried yet? Either one of these things.
And one more piece. Could you offer some more information on how an AUS could get more involved with the consortium that you were talking about earlier?
Yeah. What state are you in?
Florida.
Florida. Oh, I'm in Florida, but I work for the Wisnick, which isn't in, which doesn't cover Florida. Turns out I got virtual positions or remote positions. I can work wherever, and I was like, I want to do it right next to the beach, and so I am. What part of Florida are you in?
Uh, St. Pete, Tampa.
Okay, I got you. I got you. All right, so that means you are in the Southern States Network Consortium. That's Sesanic. And I will. Who's your? You'd be Vision 8. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Do y'all have an AUS
For our visit,
for the
yes.
Vision? Okay. Um, and are you in regular contact with that person?
Yep, she owes me a phone call.
Okay, that's good. So there's already step one. That's going the right direction. And then I can drop a point of contact at the Sesanic. Um, for you to use because anytime the Wisnick awards a new contract or we find something that's particularly neat, I will contact the other consortia to let them know, hey, this is what we did or this is what we found. If this is any use to you, here's the information to run with it. If you want to make a similar contract, just ask me. I'll give you all my documentation and you can rip it off and get that much further ahead than would you have been if you started from scratch. And I see two people that might be useful to you. Start with this one because I'm more familiar with them.
Stephen, it would be great to see all of them because I'm familiar with your guys's, the Wisnick, and I'm
Hmm.
familiar with the MidCon, but like those others down below or up in the Northeast, I'm not familiar with them.
I gotcha. Yeah, and then in the
Is
Northeast,
there
you
a
got.
place?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Is there a place to look for this? Is what I was looking for in
Uh,
regards to the
Not that
cons.
I'm familiar with. There might be a website somewhere, but I don't remember it all the top of my head. So I just
That's
dropped in
okay.
the chat Lily Hacken, and Lily is the regional administrator for the Susseneck. And so that sounds to me like a good point of contact to get involved there. Now, from what I'm tracking, each of the consortium are different or at different stages of development and what they've been involved in, um, and that like staffing levels, how actively are they pursuing contract instruments that cover the whole consortium, and so on and so forth. And but there is a consortium. They do have staff, and give Lily a try to see what opportunities they might have to offer y'all or things they might be working on. And of course, as always, if you want to rip off anything us and the Wisnick are doing, I'm going to drop this SharePoint link in the chat here and show it to you if you haven't seen it before. I maintain the SharePoint site where I've got how to use Wisnick contracts. It's a one-page, easy guide to orient you to what's going on here. And then I got a folder for every BPA we have. You click into it, and it's going to show you a copy of the contract itself, as well as a one-page how to order this item and where to look, what information you're looking for, what you need to put in your task order package to do it, or if we encourage government purchase card holders in the Wisnick area to use this stuff. If you're not in VISN 17, 19, 20, 21, and 22, you can't directly use these things, but you could grab copies of the contract for your own research and see what we did, and then use that to benefit what you do. And I know that MidCon has a number of examples up on their SharePoint site that I have mined before, and would encourage all of y'all to do the same. Did that get you covered, Christopher?
Yes, sir, it did. Thank you.
Good deal. Good deal. Great question too.
And Stephen, I put in who the contact is for the MidCon for the VISNs and what
Good.
they're doing for our site or for our location.
Good deal. Good deal. Do I have him listed? I don't. So he is new, huh? Get him added to my contact list. He is new MidCon AUS.
Yeah. Brandon Oden went back to VISN 12 because it was Brandon and Timothy. So
Now,
Brandon went back.
Good.
He went back to 12. They as a 13, I believe, or something.
Now, is he still in AUS or did he go back to contracting?
No,
thought
he
he
is
was
an
OCO.
AUS.
Okay.
Yes, he was. He's an AUS at the VISN level, like me.
Thank you. And as y'all might be able to tell, those y'all still on the call, these calls can be a good place to introduce ourselves and to link up with people that we might want to work with. All right. Who else has questions or things they want to talk about? Because the general rule is we'll give it 2 minutes of silence, and then me and Marty will bow on out. But we'll stick around as long as we have anything to talk about.
Tim Wooster might want to get with us later, Stephen, to talk about QCR stuff. But
Okay. Gotcha.
Even
Happy to
though
share
you-
what I can.
yeah,
Don't hesitate to reach out.
I got you.
Stephen, that would be a good training possibility. The new QCR questions that have recently come out. I know we're training our AUSs at the local stations what to expect.
Mm-hmm.
Just a thought.
Yeah. And I think this next time the committee gets formed up to pick what questions go to AUSs, which I'm glad that there are mandatory questions for AUSs, because previously we had just been ignored outside of VISN 20, to the best of my knowledge. I don't know if any other VISN was doing QCR segments for the AUSs. If there were, please drop it in the chat or say something so I can pick your brain. So I'm glad we're getting included, but I'm not a fan of the questions that were selected. So I think me and Marty are going to try to get in on that committee and be like, hey, we got some other questions that we think is more important and more relevant to what the AUS does.
that's the plan anyway.
Yeah. And I like your enthusiasm, Mr. Langley. My examples are always about cinnamon flavored Tic Tacs. Orange is good though. And I do have a box that it was a Patty Guy from Puget Sound sent me of Coca-Cola flavored Tic Tacs, which actually do a really good job of reproducing the flavor of kind of a flat Coke, but not in a bad way. They are very enjoyable.
I think you might need to do some category management now. There's too many kinds of Tic Tacs being stocked.
See, do we need all the flavors, or does one flavor, is it going to do just fine? And then we can realize economies of scale by volume, simplifying our warehousing procedures because we don't need two separate areas on a shelf for different flavors. We could just go with one. See, it's all downstream. It's all interconnected, man. Oh, as Mr. Langley was wanting to hear about what Tim was talking about with the QCRs. And so, in addition to doing a great job in his QCR overall, Mr. Wooster had the thing that I directly ripped off from him. I'll show it to you because I did do a class on auditing your contracts and step through a sample of that. But that's as far as I had gone. I had copies of all my stuff, but I didn't have them organized in a list where it was easily searchable, and so the information was less useful to me. But after seeing Tim Wooster's audit tracker, I went through all the fiscal years I've been here and made this thing. So his has got more doodads to it, but mine just has what I need. When did I do the audit? What did I audit? The contract instrument number, the very brief description of what that was about, and is it compliant with the contract terms or not? And did I have any interesting findings? If so, what were those interesting findings? And boy, howdy, a particular vendor that is kind of troublesome to deal with, turns out is very, they have very generous interpretations of what the BPA terms are that they hold, and this is information I can use as past performance information when it comes to future evaluations. Like if they can't follow the terms of the contracts they have, why would I think that they would be able to follow the terms of contracts to come? And now I can just sort and filter whatever it is I want, and bam, within seconds, I've got the key information here, and then I know which PDF to go look at if I want more details. So big thanks there. And darn right, the 80-20 rule. Pareto strikes again. Yep. Going back through these comments here. Good stuff. I didn't even say their name, but you knew. You knew. Did you ever get a chance to talk or email with their owner? Because he is a different flavor of character. Professionalism, I don't know, is what I would use to describe him. Yeah. That's a true story. That is a true story. All right. Well, I think that's pretty good to wrap it up for the day. And see, we're almost 25 minutes past the hour talking about interesting stuff and learning from each other. This is all good. And so I appreciate your time. I know Martin does too. And we're going to get on out of here and hope you all have a great day. And if we don't see you before the new year, hope you have a Merry Christmas or whatever other observations you got. Hope you enjoy that too. Thank you.